Good afternoon and welcome to the ABARES Outlook 2022 conference. Amelia Bernasconi, my name. I'll be with you this afternoon from the ABC Rural team and looking forward to talking livestock with you throughout the afternoon. Of course, this conference this year, the focus is on growing agriculture through innovation and sustainability, something no doubt you're no strangers to. This afternoon, we will explore that livestock industry and when premium traits become a social license to operate. Before we do dive into that, though, there is still a little bit of housekeeping, despite us being online again this year. If you've been to a few sessions throughout the conference, you're probably getting used to how the Q&As work. You'll find a little tab in the menu on your left. You can pop your questions in there. You can also upvote questions if you're also wondering the same thing as other people have already submitted. And we will hear from all our speakers first and endeavour to get all those answers to all your questions. So on the left-hand menu, you should see a little questions tab where you can pop your thoughts there. We will hear from all of our speakers first, and then we'll have about half an hour at the end to hopefully get answers to all your questions. If you miss anything as well on the way through or get pulled away for anything, the beauty of us being online is that you can catch up over the next 24 hours. There is a session catch up tab you'll see on the side there as well. But we are here today to talk livestock and when premium traits become a social license to operate. Because we know for some products that higher animal welfare, carbon neutrality, and certain production inputs or their absence are tied to ideas of quality. And such products can earn a price premium. However, over time, societal expectations can change. Minimum requirements can be driven not only by consumers, but by those completely removed from the supply chain. With livestock prices breaking records over the last year or so, and as you'll soon hear from our ABARES analyst, they are set to continue to rise and stay strong. How do our producers position themselves to maintain that social license in the coming years? We will explore that here over the next hour or so. You'll hear from ABARES, Rabobank, Australian Organic Meats, and the Livestock Collective. But your first speaker today is Jonathan Wong from ABARES. He leads the livestock team with ABARES Agricultural Forecasting and Policy. Jonathan is the beef and veal analyst and contributes to ABARES Agricultural Commodities publications. Jonathan's previously worked in both trade and water at the Department of Agriculture, Water and the Environment, and has a Master of Environment and Resource Economics from ANU, a Bachelor of International Studies as well from the University of New South Wales. Jonathan, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the livestock session here at Outlook. My name is Jonathan Wong. I'm the beef and veal economist here at ABARES. Over time, traits that can attract a price premium can become expected by consumers and society more broadly. They can become widely adopted and spread through the supply chain, in which case the price premium dissipates. So, how do businesses stay ahead of the curve? And although prices right now are good, how do producers make sure that the prices they're getting are the best they can be? Before our speakers jump into discuss this topic further, I'm going to provide a quick overview of ABARES livestock sector forecasts for the outlook period. In 2021-22, the livestock sector broke many records and it's forecast to continue doing so. Nominal GVP was a record, and in real terms it was the second highest GVP for the sector on record. This is mainly due to high cattle and sheep prices. We've all seen the record prices that livestock have been getting over the last 12 months. And we've also seen strong prices for dairy products and for wool. This upwards trend is expected to continue through the outlook period. In 2022-23, cattle prices are forecast to fall as rebuilding momentum eases. That said, this will be a little bit dependent on the weather. Sheep prices are forecast to increase as we see an increase in demand from the US and from the Middle East. Milk prices are forecast to increase as global supply chain disruptions limit the production and transport of milk around the world. All products, including wool, are expected to see an uptick in prices as demand recovers from the COVID-19 pandemic. There's a few general themes that I'd like to discuss quickly for the outlook period. Firstly, as alluded to, we've seen a global economic recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic, but there's uncertainty as to how this will unfold. To try and capture some of this uncertainty, ABARES have used two different scenarios to explore what could happen: the faster scenario and the slower economic recovery scenario. In the slower recovery scenario, we're likely to see lower demand for livestock products, but continued supply chain disruptions and food price inflation. This will support the livestock sector in the initial few years of the outlook period, but it will leave it a few $1 billion short relative to the faster recovery scenario by the end of the outlook period. Which leads me to my second point, that the increases in world demand for livestock products will be greater than those for supply. This will mean that there's additional price upwards pressure through the outlook period. There's a few opportunities and challenges as well. I've spoken about COVID-19 already. I'd also like to briefly speak about free trade agreements. Australian exporters are going to have opportunities to export to the UK, and they may soon have opportunities to export to Europe under the FTA. However, it's also worth noting what our competitors are doing. Is Australia going to be able to maintain its comparative advantage in markets that it currently enjoys that in? And finally, it's worth noting, where is the livestock sector going to go next? We've seen record profits or record prices over the last 12 months. So where are these profits being invested? Are they going to help producers get the best prices for their products through the outlook period? I'll leave the rest of the discussion to our speakers, so I'll refer back to the chair. Thank you.
Jonathan Wong there from ABARES, your first speaker this afternoon. Of course, if you have any questions for Jonathan, pop them in the little tab on the side there, and we will circle back to our Q&As later this afternoon. But moving now to Rabobank, where Angus Gidley-Baird is the senior analyst with Rabo Research Food and Agribusiness Research Team. He's responsible for research and analysis on the local and global animal protein sectors. In his role, Angus provides regular market updates on beef, sheep meat and pork, as well as poultry and seafood markets. He's a lead author on the Rabobank Global Beef Quarterly and writes the Australian Beef Seasonal Outlook. He also develops and writes feature research, providing knowledge and insights on key industry issues. Recent reports of Angus Gidley-Baird's include looking at livestock supply management of GHG emissions, growth in grain-fed beef markets, forward and value-based marketing for beef, and global demand outlook for sheep meat. Angus is also a regular public speaker at events just like today. And for more from Angus, let's take a listen to Angus Gidley-Baird from Rabobank.
Hi there. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you virtually today at the ABARES Outlook Conference for 2022. There's been a groundswell support and movement towards sustainability in the last couple of years, and quite frankly, it's been immense. But how do producers position themselves to maintain their social licence and meet some of these new community expectations? And at the same time, what opportunities are there for extracting value out of these sustainability attributes? Getting value out of sustainability, that's the topic of my presentation today. I thought I'd start at the beginning and trying to identify what is a premium product and what constitutes a premium product, and therefore whether or not sustainability criteria can fit into that basket. Well, products sit on a spectrum. Basically, you've got premiums at one end, premium products at one end, and then the mass market at the other, and everything that goes in between. Generally, a premium product will be price inelastic. We need to have some sort of value proposition for the consumers, and they need to be willing to pay for that. And also some degree of scarcity. If the supply is smaller, that creates a greater imbalance in the supply and demand, and obviously the ability to leverage price premiums. We can see it across a range of different product classes. You've got your Rolex watches on one hand, you've got your Casio watches at the other end of the spectrum. Same goes in the meat cabinet as well. We look at premium mince. In this case, it's grass-fed premium mince sold for $20 a kilo. In the same retailer, you've got your conventional mince being sold for $13 a kilo. Now, this spectrum evolves, it grows, it will continue to evolve and grow as attributes are added and consumer preferences change. We've now got above our grass-fed premium mince, we've now got an organic product that's selling for $26 a kilo over the $20 a kilo grass-fed product. And we'll continue to see this evolve through time as well. Some of you may start to notice these things on the shelf now. This is another mince, it's another organic label, and it's actually got a sustainability label on the front of it as well. Now, interestingly, this isn't actually being sold at a premium. It's the same as the $26 organic product, but still, they're leveraging the sustainability characteristics of this product with a view of attracting more consumers. But what traits do premium products actually entail? Well, in 2016, Nielsen did a survey of millennials and boomers to ask them what the order of importance was for traits for them in identifying with premium products. I've got them all listed down here, and on the right-hand side are my thoughts on whether or not they could actually tick the sustainability factors, could tick this box. A lot of it remains uncertain at this stage. We're in very early stages of development of these labels and these characteristics, and also indeed the consumer's expectations in this space. And in this early stage, when you've got this first market mover advantage, there are opportunities, but I think that may erode over time. Here's an interesting case. This is the Fonterra milk company, dairy company over in New Zealand. Last year in July, they released their carbon zero milk. It's available in the retail shelves in New Zealand now. A quick search online a couple of weeks ago shows, however, that they're actually pricing this product lower than some of their other branded milks on the same shelves. So they're actually offering consumers a discount for a carbon zero product, possibly in a view to actually attracting sales, but it all comes down to how that product owner wants to position this product in the market. Let's look at another product with sustainability credentials and how that's performed over time. And we're looking at cage-free eggs here. We've got sales volumes in grocery and retail of Australian cage-free egg industry over the last 15 years. What we can see here, in 2013, it got a bit of a shot in the arm when one of our major supermarkets decided to go cage-free for their private label, and the orange bars here started to grow quite exceptionally. In fact, in the last 10 years, they've more than tripled in sales volumes. Compare that to the dark blue line along the bottom for the conventional eggs, which has really maintained the status quo. Now, cage-free eggs do sell at a premium. Now, whether you classify that premium as just covering the costs involved that are associated with the cage-free eggs, or whether it's considered a profit margin, we'll leave that, we'll park that debate over there. But the point being here is that the consumer is required to pay more for those cage-free eggs, and we've actually seen consumption of those eggs increase over time. So it would appear that there is a definite opportunity to leverage some of these sustainability factors and extract greater prices or greater value out of the market. One other key thing I wanted to make a point with on this graph, however, is the dark blue lines that have stayed relatively consistent. While ever you've got a position where there is a premium in the market and a mass market, I'd argue that the opportunity for the consumer to make a choice based on price will mean that there are always going to be consumers of that low price product. So in the case of sustainability factors, if we find ourselves in a situation where one product is promoting sustainability factors and one is not, and there's a price difference between them, I'd argue that there will continue to be a market for that product that doesn't have the sustainability factors because of its lower price point. So, can sustainability factors or attributes lead to premiums? Yes, I believe they can, but I think that there's also a couple of major differences around sustainability credentials that sets it apart from other premium attributes. Firstly, the socialisation of benefits and the community momentum or expectation to move in this space. The socialisation of benefits will mean that that consumer that goes into the supermarket to buy that carbon neutral beef, or in the case of Fonterra, the carbon zero milk, is not only getting a little bit of a personal benefit from their point of view, and it's really about their social conscience rather than necessarily any difference in the quality of the product, but they're also contributing to a much broader community benefit. How far that willingness of that consumer is to extend that payment for that broader community benefit, I think is still yet to be tested. There are two other things that I think are important from a sustainability factor that sets it apart from other premium traits for products in the market. One is that you've got this whole of supply chain and the external parties all working in a similar sort of direction. Not only the producers, but you've got the input suppliers, the processors, the wholesalers, the retailers, the food service operators, the external operators, financiers, banks, investors, governments, industries, all working towards this. And that's going to make it a lot harder to draw any sort of distinction across the board. Yes, it might actually facilitate all of supply chain cooperation, but it'll also mean that a lot of the players in that space are working together. And when I say a lot of players, we're actually already seeing a lot of the key operators in this space putting pegs in the ground and saying, this is our ambition, this is where we want to get to, this is our target. And when people are actually doing that, you've got a clear idea from a consumer point as to the movement in that space. So the ability to actually draw a niche out of that market when all the operators are moving in that space becomes a little bit more difficult. So, can sustainability attract premiums, and how do producers position themselves to meet these consumer expectations? Well, I think there are 4 key things that we need to think about first of all here. Can producers position themselves to meet these new expectations? Well, yes, but technology is going to play a vital part. Technology is the great enabler in a lot of these sustainability ambitions that we've got. You're going to see things in the research in the areas of genomics, in nutrition, smart technology, soil management. All these things will enable a lot more to actually unfold through this process. And we may actually find that you get productivity gains out of this, or you may even get cost savings in some cases. So it's actually going to enable a lot of these things to actually happen. So we need to keep an eye on technological advancements and developments. The second one is management and accounting, because at the end of the day, if you're actually putting a label on something, you're going to have to back that up with some sort of credible evidence and information. There's going to be a lot more management and accounting, a lot more data collection and accounting of that information to actually maintain the integrity through the supply chain. So I think that's going to be a critical thing, whether or not you actually achieve a premium at the other end, but it's more about maintaining consumer trust and the integrity of that supply chain. You're going to have to capture this stuff, not only for your own benefits in terms of assessing your own position, but also for all the other supply chain partners in there to maintain some of that brand integrity. And then in terms of whether or not, there's opportunities to get additional value out of this space, we've got to bear in mind economic conditions. At the moment, we've seen retail prices for beef go up 8% in the last 12 months, and that was on top of a similar value the year before. We've got good economic growth at the moment, so very favourable positions for consumers to be willing to spend more. If that's to change in the other direction, is that consumer going to tend back towards a lower cost alternative rather than reaching for some of these ambitious higher priced products? So we've got to be bearing that in mind. Also from a production point of view, we've got great seasons at the moment, great livestock prices. We're seeing a lot of on-farm investment. Our rural confidence survey for Rabobank showed 38% of farmers in Q4 last year are looking to increase their on-farm investment. So it's a great environment at the moment to actually facilitate some of this change. But again, if that's to change, prices drop, revenues drop, the ability or the ambition to actually invest on farm is going to be more constrained. And the final thing I wanted to leave you with, and the balance I think is the critical one here, is we've got to look at it from a value proposition as opposed to a price proposition. If that producer and supply chain is going to get any value out of it, because added value can come in a number of forms and it's not just a price premium. It could come in the form of innovation and productivity gains. It could come in the form of risk management, improved risk management, access to new markets, supporting access to capital, and potentially enhanced brand reputation. And I think it's important to look at the whole remit and the whole basket in terms of what possibilities might arise out of this, rather than simply saying, I'm chasing a sustainability ambition and I'd like the consumer to pay for it. Because, as I said, the socialisation of benefits are going to mean that everyone in this supply chain is having to manage some of the change, but also get some of the reward at the end as well. Thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to catching up sometime soon. Thank you.
Angus Gidley-Baird there from Rabobank, Senior Analyst with the Rabo Research Food and Agribusiness team. You might have also caught some of Rabobank's new podcasts that Angus has been part of developing as well. It's great to be with you this afternoon for the ABARES Outlook conference. Just a reminder, you can keep popping your questions in, and all your speakers this afternoon will be joining us in about 20-30 minutes time to answer all your questions. But our next speaker, I'd like to introduce Simone Tully from Australian Organic Meats. Simone's the founder and farmer of the organic beef industry within Australia. She's been pioneering global networks for organic farmers since the mid-1990s as joint managing director of the Australian Organic Meats Group, which is an organic food company that represents farmers in their quest to achieve fair market returns for their products. Simone was recognised as a finalist in the 2018 Australian Financial Review 100 Women of Influence. Simone's previously acted as co-chair of the Organic Federation of Australia and contributes towards government policy development on behalf of the organic industry. On top of all that, Simone and her family also operate a beef property near Gundawindi on the New South Wales-Queensland border. Simone, thank you for joining us as well.
Hi everyone. What a pleasure it is to have been invited to speak at the Outlook Conference 2022. What an amazing period of time it's been for all of us, and I'll try and keep it as brief as possible so we can move on to the most important Q&A section. So my area of expertise really is in very small but highly popular organic food sector, and I will try to give everybody a picture of what is happening around the world and what our challenges are here in Australia, and the opportunities to protect that all-important premium that we're talking about. So as background, AOM Group has been in operation now for about 12 years. I've certainly been a passionate advocate for the organic sector since the mid-90s. I've formed several companies, I've invested in companies overseas, I've built up some logistics business and on-sold them to customers. So I've really participated in all parts of the supply chain. We currently export from a number of locations around Australia and New Zealand, and participate in various areas of brand development in countries across Asia, the Middle East, and the US. So what is happening in organics? A lot. And, you know, Australia, you know, we've timed it very well. In our industry, I know it's been a long, hard road, but in terms of those farmers that were willing to convert to organics for a number of reasons, it wasn't always just about a premium, but that does help. And I've certainly sat around plenty of kitchen tables talking to farmers across the country, which I thoroughly enjoy. And we are, you know, we're facing many of the same challenges, and I get a great sense of achievement in being able to create opportunities and a premium for those farmers, and it really makes them feel rewarded for the extra effort they're doing. And I think Australian livestock producers can be very proud of what we do in this country, whether you're organic or free range or a specialty breed producer. I think we all contribute to this wonderful industry. So there's a lot happening in this sector around the world, and I've used some headline numbers here. The EU has set a target for 25% of all their agriculture to be certified organic by 2030, which is mind-boggling, but already in 15 countries, over 10% of their land is certified organic. And some countries such as Estonia, I believe it's over 40%. I think in Austria it's 25%. I have mentioned here, just briefly, we do have some challenges in our regulatory framework in this country. So we do have some current recognitions in place that were set some years ago. We are entering a very challenging period. So we do have to do some things to protect our market access and ensure we can retain whatever additional recognition we get for being certified organic. The EU currently has around 17 million hectares certified. North America has around 3.7 million hectares certified, very high value landscape in North America. And of course, down in our part of the world, we've got a vast area certified, which is our extensive cattle and sheep rangelands, which is something, of course, Australia has a natural advantage in these beautiful landscapes that we manage. In terms of sales, so when you look at the pie around the world, I've really just mentioned the main markets that are important for us, but I haven't broken it down to the Middle East and parts of Asia. China is around 10% and growing, but the powerhouse for Australia and particularly for meat has been the US. It does take up 41% of global sales, still increasing strongly. And now last year, 2021, the Organic Trade Association over in the US calculated their industry worth $60 billion US. The EU accounts for around 37%, and China, of course, sitting there at 8.5%. Canada's an interesting one. They've actually lost a few producers, but they have increased the area. So they have had some farmers moving out of organic certification, but they have still increased the overall sales in the sector by 33% over the last few years. And then when you want to compare it to the conventional growth of the food industry for the US and Canada, the overall regular industries increased by 23%, but the organic sector's increased by 57%. So although we're very small, we're growing very quickly, and we are suffering from many of the growing pains, as you would imagine. Our regulatory framework is one of them, not being able to keep up with market access. Just to put meat into context, I thought this was an interesting number for everybody to be aware of, that the meat, poultry, fish segment of organics is just 1.7 billion in sales, but increased rapidly. So I am finding myself increased demand from many facets of the industry, but it is about streamlining the trade and having the capacity to supply as well on a larger scale. I thought it would be interesting to note what is happening over there as a reflection on what we're seeing with governments around the world, but in the US, Joe Biden did reinstate Tom Vilsack, who was a very passionate advocate for the organic sector under the ABARES regime, and then they have stated that agriculture is very central to their climate change goals. So the organic sector intends obviously to play a role in those credentials. One of the tools that they implemented over in the US, which we do not have here in this country, of course, is that the US does offer to cover 50% in a cost-sharing arrangement for certification. So that's been an enormous assistance in expanding their supply chains. So a little window into the current Australian organic sector. Currently, we're estimated through the IBIS survey to be undergoing around 8% year-on-year growth. We're exporting to over 60 countries. The industry, we've been valued at about $2.5 billion for the last couple of years. The numbers and the data in Australia are a little fragmented. I'm not 100% confident on the numbers, but we do pull them from various areas, but I would love to see more data collection in this country. I don't think it's as rigorous as other parts of the world. We do know the land area is around 10%, so we're a bit of a powerhouse in that rangeland management, and that's something I think that we should be promoting to these world forums, that we are over half of the world certified area to organic, which I think, adds to our credentials in this country as good land stewards. In terms of the people involved, here's how small we are. Estimated to be around 400 producers overseeing 8 million hectares in Queensland, 200 producers with 3.5 million hectares under their management in South Australia, and look at the NT. Just 27 producers have 9 million hectares, and obviously that reflects our vast landscape. Of our entire industry, around half the industry is the organic beef sector. There are some substantial lamb producers as well, but I've focused a little bit on beef in this explanation. And then meat exports do make up 21% of the export revenue. Once again, I'm not 100% confident of the numbers, but I am fairly familiar with some of those export numbers, so it's good, but we could do better certainly in some of our data collection. This is important. I do want to get on to explaining a little bit about how we need to continue to earn our premiums. So this is the certified organic regulations around the world. As you can see, a lot of the world is ahead of us. We are standing out as behind. And I know, look, we've got some things happening now, but I want to just emphasise it's a really important time for Australia to catch up, to maintain and ensure we get good market access for our high value products. This is currently happening. The Australian government has been undergoing a regulatory impact statement consultation. That's been happening for about 18 months. And look, it has come out now, and please go to haveyoursay.awe.gov.au/organics. And the submissions are a very easy process, and we look forward to your feedback before the 17th of March. I have emphasised this particular statement, which is in the RES, which says that some of Australia's major trading partners, including the US, South Korea, and actually China as well, do require more robust domestic regulatory regime as a prerequisite to entering negotiations. So we don't have equivalency with these countries, and we're having to do multiple audits with our farmers. It's an enormous additional burden. We feel it's unnecessary if our governments could obtain mutual recognition, but we can't do that without a legislative framework to do so. The industry has been self-funded, we've grown independently, but we really are in need of more regulation. There was, just to support that, the industry has done a consumer survey across Australia. As you can see, the consumers here in this country are very much in favour of mandatory certification, which I think supports the regulatory framework. So our conclusion, from my business point of view, and just talking about my credentials, I'm on the front line facing the challenges of exporting and producing organic goods like many other people in the trials and tribulations of the pandemic. We have been able to add customers across the world during this period of time. We continue to see some fabulous inquiry for organics from small and large supermarket and restaurant groups. We continue to welcome newly certified organic producers to the program, reasonably large scale, which is exciting. We do want to underpin the expansion. The industry now has 7 or 8 industry brands going to various countries around the world, so we want to make sure all of our programs are supported. And we do continue to reward our organic producers for the additional efforts they are undertaking. I know it is a little onerous, the multiple audit programs to maintain customer access has been challenging, so we look forward to engaging with government a little more. So heading back to the premium, is it safe? So we do have a lack of domestic regulation. It is becoming a significant barrier to trade. We do have audit fatigue, so we're audited onerously, we think, for market access when we feel that we could have a much more streamlined process. Are we in danger of losing sight of the forest for the trees? This is important. Australia's done such an amazing job, but we've got to catch up. We've really got to put all our data points in place so that we can really have good information so our industry leaders can make great decisions on our behalf and we can maintain our market access. We're very fragmented in the organic sector, and we really are a part of the meat industry, and we're a part of the dairy sector, and we're a part of the grain sector. But there are some overarching, interesting aspects that we have to pull together and streamline these things. So you do wonder how we can interface that better. And for the industry in general, I do feel that this niche specialty segment that we're in, but it could be Wagyu, it could be any other things. I really think the small producers, small exporters have a really important role, and it's the personality of our industry, the secret sauce of what we can do to win on the shelf around the world, and it's what we are doing. How can we supercharge these small, precious supply chains so that they can thrive and add great value for our farming sector? Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Simone Tully. There, again, you will be able to ask questions of Simone from Australian Organic Meats a little later on this afternoon. Don't be shy. The beauty of being virtual is you don't have to stand up in front of a big crowd and ask a question. You simply have to chuck it in a little chat box and we can put it to our speakers inside the next 15 minutes. But next, as we talk about premium traits giving us social licenses to operate, Holly Ludeman from the Livestock Collective. She is the founder, the managing director of the Livestock Collective, which is a non-for-profit company She developed in 2019 out of a crisis and critical need to improve the Australian community connection and understanding of the livestock export industry. Holly and the Livestock Collective team continue to deliver key communications and leadership capacity building projects in assisting that drive of community acceptance and trust in the livestock industry and ag more broadly. Holly's employed as a corporate governance and compliance officer for Emmanuel Exports. She has a Bachelor of Agricultural Science at La Trobe University and a Bachelor of Veterinary Medicine and Surgery at Murdoch Uni, WA. Holly's worked extensively in the livestock export supply chain and as a vet before she moved into more management roles in operations and compliance. Your final speaker this afternoon, Holly Ludeman.
So in the ABARES Outlook 2022 session today, I'm going to talk about a live export case study and how the Australian community acceptance can drive changes in a trade. And through this presentation, we'll be thinking about how producers can position themselves best to maintain social license, to have community acceptance, and ultimately have the freedom to operate while continuing to improve. So what drives acceptance in an industry, and specifically in the live export industry? I was really inspired, as a veterinarian working in the industry. I heard people like Charlie Arnott and Linda Etherton from the Centre of Food Integrity talk about the trust model that was developed in the US. And that looked at what really drove trust and acceptance and freedom to operate. And for me, the key take-home message was that shared values was what could drive trust and acceptance, not necessarily facts and figures and science. And as a scientist, that was kind of counterintuitive. In Australia, we have research being done by LiveCorp, the R&D body for the industry, for the live export industry, and more broadly, the agricultural industries through AgriFutures has a community trust in rural industries project, and both of those are using researchers Vaconic to look at what drives community acceptance in these industries. In live export specifically, like LiveCorp's research has just been released in the last year or so. So they've got a 3-year project to survey 5,000 people and look at the pathways and what drives acceptance in this highly controversial industry. And not surprisingly, the standards in animal welfare really drive community acceptance. The value and the nutritional value that we add to overseas markets is an important part of acceptance. Trust and the community being responsive is another key driver of trust. And then obviously the economic value proposition to Australian communities and people overseas is another key driver of trust. So there were a lot of positives in this recent research, and not all positive, but if we just look at this first example, we have 72% of people agree that the live export industry makes an important economic contribution to Australia. So the industry creates around $2 billion to the economy, employs 13,000 people, has a huge supply chain impact across rural Australia. But is that enough to drive acceptance? And giving those facts and figures, is that enough to tell the community that this industry should be sustainable? Well, it's a complex relationship, and we'll go into why the live export industry has been so controversial. And interestingly, in a lot of the other questions that this research has, looked at, we'll just look at the top right here. Should Australia stop the export of live animals to overseas markets? We have, 35% of the population agreeing that live export should stop, and another third, or 37%, disagreeing. And what's really interesting, or I suppose positive, or the opportunity in this research shows that there was a number of people that are sitting in that neutral position and don't have strong views either way, or have gaps in their knowledge. And that's a key focus of today's talk to keep thinking about as we go through. So how can producers position themselves with this new research? And I think the research outcomes have shown, whether it's this wider community trust research or the more detailed specific research into live export industry's acceptance, is that we need to be responsive and listen to the community and what their concerns are, and proactively engage and respond quickly, and demonstrate our response through actions, and use popular channels to communicate that information. And so this is really important, and this research hadn't been completed when I started a project called the Livestock Collective, and we'll go back through and look at why that has been successful when you now see these results from research and community, what drives community trust and what they want to see moving forward. So consumers and the community, because not all of our products are consumed in Australia, have questions about food, where it comes from, who's producing it, and how. And we have questions in Australia as a large exporting nation about how companies operate, their practices, how livestock are treated, how our environment is treated, how our communities are treated. And that's really important, that we listen to those questions and make sure we can respond appropriately. So if we take the live export example now, no industry within the agriculture has been more controversial potentially than the live export industry. Consumers and the community in Australia have been bombarded with emotive messages, many not factual, many sensationalised, but many representing crisis events or non-compliance events, not necessarily the daily normality of the industry. And for myself as a veterinarian, and the core of my role is animal welfare, no one wants to see animals suffer. And when we see these emotive images, it affects everyone, especially those that work in the supply chain. So we've seen crisis events lead to rapid changes in regulatory frameworks, social I suppose, responses, political responses, and huge regulatory responses. In 2011, we saw the banning of the live cattle trade to Indonesia and huge ramifications to Northern Australia and cattle producers. And in 2018, we saw footage from sheep on board vessels to the Middle East, and then huge ramifications and changes to that industry from a regulatory framework and politically, and then that caused huge ramifications in the southwest of WA. And in both these cases, we've seen large, well-funded, coordinated campaigns targeting voters and people, and that third of people that will send letters to their politicians, that are potentially on the East Coast in Melbourne and Sydney and don't have a connection with someone that may be involved in that industry. So essentially, when there's a void of information, it will be filled. And in the live export industry, it was filled with a large, well-coordinated, well-funded activist voice, using emotive messages to drive community to put pressure on regulators, policymakers, politicians to change, ban, or stop certain practices. So in 2019, after the crisis in the live sheep industry, as a veterinarian, and the core of my role was welfare, I wanted to share my truth. And the industry didn't have a united voice in a very public debate. And the debate was happening without the industry being present. So we needed to change the hearts and minds of the community regarding live export, to openly share information using these shared values, not giving them facts and figures and how much the industry was worth, but finding something that they could connect with. And as you can see here, we've got a team of people standing below. We called ourselves the Justice League. And that was a farmer, a truck driver, a shearer, a vet, a stock person that could share their stories, their truth. And the importer as well, talking about what it meant to them to be part of this supply chain and how important it was to their community, their families. And we needed to meet emotion with emotion and be part of the conversation. So the challenges that the industry faced that I saw at the time was, we have a group of individualists in the agricultural industry. We can have the transporters industry, we can have the shearers, we can have producers, we can have exporters, but they weren't working together and collaboratively for the sustainability of the industry. We had a challenging political landscape, and this is 3 years ago when I started this project, and we're potentially going into that political challenge again, where you may have a change of government and then change of policy. We have urban-rural divide and this growing proportion of people that may not have a connection with agriculture that we need to work on. And then for the industry, it hadn't been transparent and it had no trust in the jar, and there was a resistance to change. It was a legal business and they were getting on and doing their job, and they weren't used to having to tell anyone about that. So the plan for me and what we were doing, and this was before the research that we've just talked about had been undertaken, but we needed to get social media and be part of the conversation happening and active. We created content. I took a blog on a voyage and sent it around. It got 90,000 views in the first 2 weeks. So we showed there was this huge void of information. We were in front of media scrums, as you can see here, which was not what I expected to be doing, but each of us could share our truth and our information authentically, and that led to having more balanced media discussions, more balanced articles to share information, and hopefully people then had balanced information to make an informed decision. One of the most rewarding things was also doing vessel tours and taking politicians and community members and producers and agents to see for themselves and make their own informed decision. So I think the take-home message for me of what producers can do to gain social license in the coming decades is invest in advocacy, share your stories, build champions that can advocate for the industry and respond to community concerns. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed this talk.
Holly Ludeman, the founder of the Livestock Collective, thank you as well. Thank you to all our fantastic speakers this afternoon at the ABARES Outlook Conference 2022. If you would like to put any of your questions to our wonderful speakers this afternoon, you'll just find a little tab in the menu on your left. You can pop any questions in there. We will be here for another 15 minutes or so, so get in quickly there. Thank you to Julie Cameron, who's got in touch. Probably a question for you, Simone, if we bring you back in. Julie's wondering if organic accreditation in EU, USA is the same as in Australia, if there's an international agreed accreditation there.
Yes, there is. And actually the European agreement for organics with Australia was done some years ago, similar to New Zealand. But I have recently been informed that actually is in danger of being reviewed and comes to an end around 2024. They do have a regulatory framework in those countries and we do not. So that is definitely up for discussion. But so far we have been recognised for export, not regarding your normal tariff industry, but certainly on the organic side. But we do have to do some more work on that.
Simone, let's keep you here for just one more question for now. Sean's wondering if you think sustainable or organic meat will shift from being that premium product to a standard product. Is that possible? Is that something that is a concern within your sector?
I'm not really concerned because I do think it's about relationships and service levels. There's a lot of other things involved, and making sure what I'm probably quite passionate about is ensuring true value of the product for the consumer and ensuring that the reward and the return flows all the way back to the farmer. And that's where the challenge of having really good data and supply chain management comes into place. When you said a standard product, I think the point would be the true cost of production plus a fair reward is fantastic, because farmers have actually been probably underpaid. It's been a race to the bottom in the food industry around the world. So I look forward to a move away from that.
Simone, thank you. Of course, you can put your questions in on that little tab at the left as well. We have one here from Steve Reed. Angus, this might be a question for you. Steve says, might there be only a relatively small time window in which sustainability is a premium attribute before sustainability becomes mainstream and is expected for mass market products? Steve's asking, before sustainability becomes an expected part of business, with the price required to sell a non-sustainable product being too low for economic production.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair point. The challenge we've got at the moment is that we're in this early stage, so there are those early market movers that can get in and potentially carve out a niche. But as I highlighted, the movement that we've got with a number of operators in this space, all moving towards this, plus general social and community expectations out there as well. I mean, I look at myself as a consumer, and I'd see a steak on the shelf in the supermarket, and one that says it's sustainable and one that says it's not, and I'd question, well, the one that's not, why is it not sustainable? And I think as a consumer, we've got to recognise that might be a question for a lot of consumers out there. So maybe picking up on the point before that Simone was talking about, I think there's a distinction to me anyway between sustainable and organic. You can be sustainable and organic together, but they also operate in, you don't have to be organic to be sustainable. And I think organic's got its own niche. It's got a defined market. We've seen that. We've seen dedicated consumers paying a premium for a long period of time. I think in the sustainability space, we've got that general social benefit that everyone thinks it'd be nice to get there. Whether they're willing to pay for it is another question. But I think because of everyone else in the supply chain all moving in this direction, I think it's going to become very difficult not to actually keep up. And if you have a product that's on the shelf that isn't labelled sustainable in 5 or 10 years' time, you might actually be sold at a discount. So I think that's probably where we need to think about it. Not so much can you attract a premium at the moment, but it's about where that consumer is going to position it in their hierarchy of goods on the shelf. And I believe that this is going to become almost an expectation of consumers for all products.
Louise Cappell's made an interesting point as well, Angus. She's asking if the current high prices of meat, as well as other high costs of living like petrol and diesel that we're seeing at the moment, if you think that'll result in a shift away from premium products as well, if that translates into a decrease in demand, and if there's any ways to counteract that.
From a general point of view about premiums, I mean, premiums have a premium because they've got a value proposition to that consumer, and generally that consumer will be attached to that value proposition. If it's organic or if it's grass-fed or whatever attribute it might be a high marble content and Wagyu, for example. The consumer is placing a value on that and is willing to pay for that. I believe, yes, high price environments do start to challenge some of those consumers, but it all comes down to, like Simone said, it's the value proposition you put to that consumer, and if it's a genuine value, they will continue to pay for it. This is where I find sustainability to be slightly different in the sense that they're not necessarily deriving all the personal benefit themselves, and therefore are they willing to actually pay for something that a wider community is going to receive benefits for. I think it makes it a little bit harder to justify a premium for sustainability given that general public benefit that arises out of it.
Your speakers this afternoon at the ABARES Outlook 2022 conference, Holly Ludeman from the Livestock Collective, Simone Tully, Australian Organic Meats Group. You've also got Angus Gidley-Baird there from Rabobank and Jonathan Wong from ABARES. Jonathan, if we come back to you, we talk about chasing these price premiums, but when businesses are already trying to maximise their profits, I mean, how do we juggle those two hand in hand?
Yeah, thanks. It's a good question. Businesses are always trying to do what's best for them, but as an industry to be strong going forward, we want to make sure that producers are getting not just good prices, but the best possible prices. And now that producers have generally been receiving high prices for livestock and livestock products, it's as good a time as any to ask, okay, well, can the products being offered to market be slightly changed? Can we invest to change our economies of scale and gain more efficiencies on farm with different infrastructure or different machinery? So it's always worth asking the question, I think.
Thank you, Jonathan. And Holly, it was interesting to hear in your speech, the most controversial sector of agriculture. No one's arguing with you, I don't think, when we look at live exports. I mean, now, though, how is the live export industry placed to respond to those social license risks or any opportunities that come up as well?
I think we've done a lot of work to reposition ourselves, and the research I was talking about is definitely helping us understand what really drives community trust, and whether it's sustainability in our agricultural practices that our other speakers have talked about. I think the difference here is community versus consumer acceptance, and are they the same? While the products that we're exporting live aren't necessarily consumed by Australians, we have a big opportunity, and obviously previously a lack of that work done on making sure the community understood the industry. So I think we need to focus on the movable middle. We need to definitely focus on the next generation of people and that younger audience that have a disconnect with agriculture, to make sure that they understand practices and we normalise practices. I think there's great examples in the Middle East of, most children have been in an abattoir and seen some form of processing, whereas that would be, not necessarily something that the Australian young people have seen in their lifetime. So that's a huge gap for us to work on.
Yeah, certainly. Holly Ludeman there from the Livestock Collective. Another one, Holly, while we've got you on screen, if we look at, where advocacy is at the moment, where would you like to see efforts placed if we just look at the livestock sector in terms of advocacy going forward?
I think that resonates from my previous answer around young people education. We run a program called Livestock Leaders, where we're trying to empower more young people, not just young people that work within the industry, to be the best advocate they can be for their area of the supply chain. And we need to normalise parts of the supply chain and share their stories, and whether that is a helicopter pilot, a truck driver, a shearer, those real stories of real people will help resonate with the community in Melbourne and Sydney that may have had no connection with our agricultural industries, and then they see crisis events that are sensationalised. So that's one of the efforts I'd like to see going forward.
Just 5 minutes left this afternoon at the ABARES conference. If you've got any questions, chuck them in quickly. If we could circle back to you, Simone, there was a lot of interest in the organic space, and I heard you mention in your presentation that a lot of the data isn't always concrete. How do we go getting more accurate data around that to see the sector grow?
Well, look, the important thing I think would be maybe the import and export codes to start with. So we could be tracking the movement of organic goods so that we'd have a more accurate number. Certainly that's what's been happening in other parts of the world. In the US, I believe they started quite small. They introduced import and export codes for 17 categories, and they've added to that continuously. So they have some really good live data on the movement of certified organic produce and goods, and I believe that helps them in their planning of their strategy for their industry. In terms of what ABARE can do in our agricultural industries, I think we still need to have more accurate data on who's doing what and how we can feed that information into our industry leadership group so that we can be a part of their strategic planning as well.
Simone, thank you, as well as all our other speakers, Holly Ludeman from the Livestock Collective, Simone Tully there from Australian Organic Meats Group, Angus Gidley-Baird from Rabobank, and Jonathan Wong from ABARES, who of course is putting on this conference for you all this week. It has been great to hear from you all this afternoon. I hope everyone else out there has got a lot out of this. You can watch back all or parts of it over the next 24 hours. But if I could encourage you to stick around, there is a virtual networking session. You might be keen to hang out there and hear a little bit more, but it's been a pleasure to spend the afternoon with you. And if anyone's missed it, your friends, colleagues out there, you can watch it back for the next 24 hours.